Hi guys, so indices. In the last video we looked at the first two rules, which was looking at what happens when we raise something to the power of 0, and in nearly all cases it's just 1 apart from when it's 0. And we also looked at what happens when the base is raised to a negative power or a negative index, and how we can rearrange this and avoid making common mistakes. So now we are going to look over the other rules of indices. So, rule 3. This rule is fairly easy to understand, and I'll do an example just so show you how it works. So the rule is a multiplied to the power of, or a to the power of m times by a to the power of n is equal to the powers of n plus n. So basically, this may look more complicated than it actually is. When two things are being multiplied against each other, or two of the same letter being multiplied by each other, the powers can just be added. So for example, when we have a to the power of 3 times by a to the power of 4, we can just add the powers to get a to the power of 7. And why this works is we know a to the power of 3 is just a times a times a, and a to the power of 4 is just a times a times a times a. So when we have these multiplied by together, this just leaves us with a to the power of 7, because we just have we just have 3a's multiplied by another 4a's, which just leaves us with this, which is 7. And just to remind you, when we have two things that are not the same letter, the same unknown variable, a and b can be totally different numbers. Therefore, when we multiply these, this is just, it doesn't change. It's just still just a to the power of 3 multiplied by b to the power of 4. We can't add them. We can't do anything. We can't have ab to the power of 7. It doesn't work like that. This is the rule. This is how it works. And this here would not work. So next, moving on to rule 4, kind of the opposite of rule 3, a to the power of c divided by a to the power of d is just c, a to the power of c minus d. So when you're multiplying, you add them. When you're dividing, you're subtracting them. And these rules are fairly easy to remember, but just to show you how it works, here we would just have a to the power of 5 divided by a to the power of 2. We just minus these powers to give us a to the power of 3. Now, a to the power of 5, we know is just a times a times a times a times a. A to the power of 2 is just a times a. And then when we divide these, we know from fractions that we can cancel. So a and a from the bottom would cancel with 2a's from the top, leaving us with 3a's on the top, giving us our answer of a to the power of 3. So that is how rule 4 works. Now, again, guys, if you need to go back and check some of the rules, that's totally fine. If you need to watch this video again just to remember these rules and note them down, that is also totally fine. So now, let's look at rule 5. Now, this one may be a little trickier to learn, but the basic rule is a to the power of b, and then outside the brackets to the power of c. When we multiply these together, that's just, we multiply the powers. So when it's a times a, we add the powers. When it's a minus a, we divide the powers. And then when it's a to the power of something, brackets times to the power of that, all we have to do is multiply the powers. So if we had a to the power of 4 to the power of 3, this just gives us 4 times 3, a to the power of 12. Here's an example. So 2a cubed to the 2a cubed, all of that squared. Now here, what we have to remember to do is actually square all the terms inside the brackets, because the brackets aren't just covering the a cubed, the brackets are covering everything. So we need to do 2 squared, which we know is just 4, and then we need to do a cubed squared, which we know from our new rule is 6, and then 4 times by a to the power of 6, it's just 4a to the power of 6. Now, moving on to our next rule. Rule 6 is actually kind of a part of rule 7, but we'll go through, but we went through rule 6 first, but we'll go through rule 6 first, even so that rule 7 is easier to understand. So the rule is, when a is to the power of a fraction, that can be converted into a to the power, or the root of a, with the bottom of the fraction as the root. So again, kind of a bit of jargon in there, but a to the power of half is just the same as a squared, because we put the bottom part of the fraction to right here, but the square root we don't normally write to because it's square root. However, if it was a to the power of a third, that's the same as the cubed root of a. Now moving on to rule 7. This allows us to move on to rule 7 quite nicely. So the rule is a to the power of m over n is equal to the n root of a to the power of m. So basically what this means is, just breaking down rule 6, it's kind of the same thing except we have introduced another factor. So here, we have a to the power of 3 over 2. This is very hard to work out. You need a calculator to put it in like this. However, by converting it into this other form, it's actually quite easy. We know to put the bottom as the square root, and then this cube here just goes inside of it right here. So this would leave us with a cubed, all of that square rooted. And this is how we can make something like this, a to the power of 3 over 2. Very difficult to work out. But we can swap it into this, and it's actually quite easy. We just need to cube a and then take the square root of it. So hopefully that isn't too difficult to understand. These were rules. Just remember, when a is to the power of a fraction, c becomes the power inside the root, and d becomes the root. And remember also, if it wasn't 3 over 2, if it was, 7 over 6, you'd still do the same thing. You'd plug it in like this, and then if you had to for the question, you would solve it. So make sure to go through the practice questions for these. And remember, a won't always be, a could also be a number, a could be 2, in which case we just do 2 cubed, which is 2 times 2 times 2, which would give us 8, and then the square root of 8. So it's really not too difficult when you start to get familiar with these rules. And remember, top becomes the power, bottom becomes the root. That's it for this video. Remember to definitely practice this, because indices are a bit of a sticking point for people, but every time you get stuck, look back at these rules, and then as you get through it, try to avoid looking at the rules. And it is quite logical, especially when you're adding and when you're multiplying, dividing, adding and subtracting the powers. But make sure to practice this, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.